So I understand that you guys have sort of a new tradition from the last time I was here, and it has to do with this affirmation that I gave to Reverend Anna, and I'm going to ask you guys to join me in saying it. I share in the glory of God because Christ is in me. One more time. I share in the glory of God because Christ is in me. You guys are doing great. One more time. I share in the glory of God because Christ is in me. Everybody feel okay with that? Sounds like it. How about when we were doing the meditation earlier and I said, I am in God and God is in me. Everybody comfortable with that? Yeah? Okay. Well, I can go home. I want to share something with you from the Message. It comes from the book of Colossians. This is sort of a modern day translation of the Bible. This mystery has been kept in the dark for a long time, but now it's out in the open. And judging by your reaction this morning, I would say that's true. God wanted everyone to know this rich and glorious secret inside and out, regardless of their background, regardless of their religious standing. The mystery in a nutshell is just this: Christ is in you. Therefore, you can look forward to sharing in God's glory. It's that simple. That is the substance of our message. Hope you don't mind my sitting that there for a minute. That really is it. I mean, in my view, that's the message of Christianity, if you understand what Christianity is about. Christ is in you. God is in you. When I say Christ is in you, I'm not talking about Jesus the man. Most of you may know this already, but Christ is not his name. Was not his name. Christ is a title. It's like a president or a king. And what Christ means is Messiah or chosen one. That is who you are. That's the truth of who you are. You are the Messiah. You are the chosen one. You are the vessel of God. And how do I know that? Because you're here. That's all it takes. Doesn't matter about your religious standing. Doesn't matter about your station in life. You are the vessel of God. You are God. I love this picture, which I had nothing to do with choosing, but to me it's sort of illustrative of what I'm talking about, because it's not just about a religious thing, it's a scientific thing. The universe has exploded into you. You are what the universe has become. You are what God has become. As I said before, this is what Christianity is all about. And Christmas is an example of that. If you really understand the meaning of Christmas, it's about giving birth to the Christ that's in you. It's about waking up to the realization that God is in you. Christ is in you. You give birth to the Christ at Christmas. And it's not a one-time thing. We have Christmas every year. We have to do it over and over and over again. And sometimes we suffer crucifixions. And so the resurrection comes along, and that's what Easter's about. Easter's about resurrecting the Christ again. resurrecting the truth of who you are again. And that's not a one-time thing either. I wrote a blog last month about this. The fact is that the world is constantly changing. And you're changing. And so you have to keep changing, becoming more of the truth of who you are. That's what God does all the time. It's called evolution. And you have to evolve too. God evolves, you evolve. What the world needs, what you're here to deliver to the world in your incarnation, changes day to day. It may be very slight from one moment to the next, but over a period of years, what you're called on to be and to do and to give to the world is something else. So it's not a one-time thing. Remember what Paul said, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Transformation is an ever ongoing process. Transformation, evolution, take your pick. Like Jesus, every one of us is fully human and fully divine. The Christ is your true self. Self with a capital S. The title of my talk today, Bringing Yourself with a capital S to life. In the book of Ephesians, we're told that God is above all, through all, and in all. That's you. That's everything. Above all, through all, and in you all. In other words, as I said before, you are what God has become. The universe has exploded into you, and I mean that in every way you can think about it. The universe has become you. You are the eyes and the ears of the universe, of God, however you want to say it. One of the things that it took me a long time to realize is just how meaningful that is. It's so meaningful that you decide. Meaning is totally up to you. You decide. That's the freedom you have. Nothing means anything until you decide what it means for you. That doesn't mean there aren't consequences. That doesn't mean there aren't things that can result from that choice, but nothing means anything until you decide what it means. Think about all the controversies in the world today, whether it's about gay marriage or abortion or any other subject, school prayer. The world has its opinions and its views, but only your views matter when it comes to what kind of meaning you're going to give to that situation. You're the one that holds the meaning. God has become you. You decide. One of the things that I think I like to do, because what I've been talking about is sort of a religious way of talking, but the truth is this is not just about religion. Anybody familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? What's at the top of the pyramid? Self-actualization. Becoming yourself. And when we talk about it in religious language, we make it a capital S. Self-actualization. A lot of New Thought churches sort of leave it at the religious side. But I think it's important to recognize that we're both human and divine, fully human and fully divine. So we can't just concentrate on self-actualization at the top of the pyramid. As long as we're in the world, as long as we're human beings, we have all those needs down at the bottom still. So what are those? Well, at the very bottom, you have your physiological needs, right? You need to be able to eat, drink, breathe, One step up, safety. You have to have security of your body, your family, your health. Another step up, belonging and love. You need friendship, you need family, you need intimacy. You need self-esteem. I don't know how you can carry God around in you without some self-esteem, right? That's not a bad thing. Confidence, achievement, respect of others, both coming your direction and going the other way. And it's only with all of that at the base of the pyramid that you can really become self-actualized. And like I was talking about before, the world changes and you change. Sometimes, even if you've become self-actualized, you might need to go back down and do some repair work because of the changes that have happened in the past. Because some of those areas down below need some attention. That's not a bad thing. It's to be expected. Because what's the nature of God? Evolution. Transformation. You're never done. You have to keep on doing it over and over again. And if you need to go back down and fix the bottom, you got to fix the bottom because you're fully human and fully divine. Self-actualization, I loved the daily word this morning. It was perfect for this message. It's about being true to who you are. All of who you are. Most of us are so covered over with the beliefs and opinions of our parents or our teachers or our coaches or our mentors or even our pastors or society in general that we don't have a clue who we are. We might think we know, but we don't really know because we're acting out of habit or out of instruction from someone else and not from that space that was what I was talking about earlier, where we decide, where we get to make meaning, right? I'm going to give you some ideas about where you can begin to discover who you are. And mind you, this is not about doing things, because being your true self is not about doing per se, it's about being. But here's a way to start to uncover. This comes from the book that I've mentioned here at the church a number of times, Finding Yourself in Transition by Robert Brummett. Here are some questions you can ask yourself. What is it I've always enjoyed doing? What has always come naturally for me? What have I felt naturally drawn or attracted to? What would I do with my life if I were not concerned with money? And I would add, if I weren't concerned with what other people think. What would I do if I knew I could not fail? If I were to die today, what would feel unfinished in my life? What is it that is so important to me that I would risk everything in order to achieve or experience it? And here's an exercise you can do. Imagine that your whole life up until now, including your very identity, was simply a story written by someone else. Now you get to write the rest of the story. You can design the rest of your life. You can write your own identity. Who would you be? What would your life be like? And how would the story end? For those of you who are interested in those exercises, they're on page 113 and 114 in the book. I bet they have it in the bookstore, maybe. This I did write my blog about last month. I talked about how an exercise that one of my coaches, one of my mentors, Reverend Richard Rogers, who's a Unity minister out in Phoenix, Arizona, gave to me. This is a simple way of doing sort of what we were talking about just then. Make yourself 3 columns. What do I love to do? What am I good at? What do I loathe to do? And then just list them. Now, I have to tell you, when I did that, I didn't, like, all of a sudden come up with some new idea of what to do or who to be, even. But about a year later, I discovered that really was who I was. One of the things I think a lot of us get caught up in, at least I did, is in trying to design my life and design my career in order to be able to accomplish all of those things that I love to do and all of those things that I want to be. Well, honestly, your vocation by itself is not going to do that. I mean, some of us are lucky enough to get a lot of it out of our vocation, but all of those human needs you got, they're not all going to come from your job. You have to fill it all in. So it's not just about what you do for a living. It's not just about your vocation. That's just one piece of it. You have to be willing to do all of those other things. Where can you satisfy those needs? Where can you be who you want to be? Where can you do what you love to do? As I mentioned before, our society doesn't always support all of those things. In fact, sometimes it does exactly the opposite. If we get too far afield from society's expectations or challenge some of the cherished beliefs that our culture has, we, like Jesus, might be crucified. And I think it's important to recognize that and to realize that. As long as we're fully human and fully divine, what's one of those basic human needs down at the bottom of the pyramid? Safety, right? I think it's important to be willing to go to as far as you can go, but sometimes you have to, like, not go all the way. Be willing to consciously choose what you're willing to be crucified for. Everything's not worth it. Be conscious about your choices. If you think about Jesus, you know, when in the Bible, what we read about him, the Pharisees hated a lot of the things that he said. And eventually, of course, he was crucified. But he was redefining things, right? He was saying it's okay to actually go pull a horse out of the hole on the Sabbath, right? You get those kinds of choices too. You get to make choices yourself about what's important to you, just like I was talking about before. But be aware that some of those maybe incur the wrath of others. I mean, history's full of those people. Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, John Lennon. There's danger in being true to yourself. You have to be willing to look at it and decide what you're willing to be crucified for. One thing I want to make sure and tell you too is, while I gave you those exercises earlier, there's really no one way, no one formula for finding who you really are, for knowing the truth about who you really are, other than that ultimate truth, right? But you are what God has become, and whatever your message is and whatever your activities are, those are the messages and the activities of God. I sometimes have thought of myself as being what I call a gap filler for God. What's missing? What does the world need? What can I do to fill in the places that I'm really not happy with? I'm really not satisfied with the way things are. What can I do about that? Only your inner self can know what that is. Those of you who've been around here for a while know that I'm something of a book fiend. And a book that I recently discovered, just finished yesterday, in fact, it's by a woman named Jean Raffa, R-A-F-F-A. And what she says in her book, I think this is perfect for this message, spiritually, our destiny is to evolve into wise, consciously integrated beings who recognize the sacredness of all life and work to preserve it at every opportunity. How do we honor the Holy Spirit's imperative to grow spiritually? By making the unconscious conscious. In other words, you dig deep into those places where you're operating out of the messages and the instructions of someone other than yourself, and begin to operate consciously and make conscious choices and decisions about who you are and what you want to be. Here are her 4 steps. Listen to your conscience. Question your true motivation. Does my desire to befriend someone come from a self-centered or ignoble motive, like wanting to use them to further my own ambitions and ego needs? Or does it come from a strong sense that this is someone I really like who has the potential to be a treasured friend? Question your motives. Recognize your feelings. That's the 3rd test. And 4th, question your own moral reasoning. Is this about serving equality and justice for all with nonviolence? Is it about feeling and being guided by love and caring? And will it cause the least possible amount of pain and harm? If your experience has been or is anything like mine, what you'll discover, I think, is that you don't know you're self-actualized, really, until you discover it in retrospect. Because it's not about doing any one thing. It's about who you be. It's about who you are. And so it's only after a certain period of time that you can look back, or you can feel in the moment, hey, I got there. And I don't say that in any way to brag, because, there have been times in the past, and this is something else you'll discover probably too, after you think you're there, right? You'll discover later on that you might not have been, because you think you are now, and it's something else. But it's an evolutionary process. It's something you do over and over again. We have to be willing to grow, willing to change, to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. I don't think it's always been on the church website, but I noticed before I came today that the church website says, Unity Church Austin is more than a building or a place. We are an assembly of diverse people united in common purpose. And then it goes on to say what the common purpose is: to discover God and ourselves in relationship to God. Our common purpose is to discover God and ourselves in relationship to God. The author I was just reading from, Jean Raffa, tells you how to achieve that purpose. This is how we find God, she says, by finding ourselves. This is how we honor God, by honoring ourselves. This is how we listen to God, by listening to ourselves. And that is how you bring yourself to life. God bless you.